Implausible Nature now has dice. That's right, you can get these awesome D6s made by our partner, Baron of Dice. These custom dice have the Implausible Nature logo on the six side and also come with square corners, which means they will roll more evenly than rounded corner dice. Head on over to baronofdice.com and use discount code IN40K to get a discount on your order and support us at the same time. Check out his full collection of dice for all your gaming needs with the link down in the description.
Hello, everyone, to Implausible Nature, home to all things Black Templar. And today we have Kale Greenfield, who recently finished second in a tournament in Canada. Forgive me, what was that tournament?
So the tournament was Fields of Damnation, and that is the big tournament for Saskatoon, which is another province over, so another state over. And it was a 2-day, 5 round, and I believe we had 47 or 48 players reach 5 rounds.
Yeah, I think the
And
final count was 45
yeah,
total.
something like that. There's
Yeah,
always a
so it was
few.
pretty good size.
Yep. Yeah. And me and some teammates went out there, took the trip. It's about 6 hours by car. So we rented a frighteningly and ill-advisedly cheap hotel room near the community center the tournament was in, and had ourselves a great time.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. All right, so first off, tell me a little bit about yourself. What brought you to the game and why the Black Templars?
Oh yeah, I've played Warhammer since I remember being like just wee and getting dropped off at the mall on a Saturday and get out of my hair and don't cause too much trouble. And our the shopping mall near my house had a Games Workshop store, and it was one of the ones that did have the full scale Space Marine out front.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that was rad. That looked so cool as like a little kid and go in and like super cool staff, and I put up with me hanging around and sticking my nose over the edge of people's tables, and I was absolutely hooked on the spot. So that would have been third edition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a red herring because I know the third edition box set was Black Templars versus Dark Eldar, but I went Eldar back then. I had the
Ooh.
Dark Eldar, and then I realized that Dark Eldar at the time have about 2 models in plastic, and the rest of them are pewter blister packs. And my allowance didn't support that thing, so I went over to Craft World Eldar because they at least had some sculpts. Sculpts they still have, to be fair, but yeah. So I started out, and as a kid I played Eldar. Oh, and I fell so in love with the lore and the world building. I mean, I was a kid, like I didn't know what I was doing with it any. And then I took a pretty long. I played from third to fifth, and then I took a pretty long hiatus because between school and work, moving around is not the most mobile hobby in the world we've got. So it was
Yep.
a big stopper until I settled down a few years ago. And right on the tail end of eighth, I started watching videos on YouTube again and going, oh yeah, like I remember, like the amount of time I spent on Warhammer forums, Bolter and Chainsword, Astronomicon. Oh, like it was very much a homecoming for me, and that was right at the tail end of eighth, and I picked up some Cadians. Had a little patrol of the Cadian Start Collector with a
Mm-hmm.
couple infantry squads in the Lehman Russ. Oh, and then the Indominus box came out, and I was like, okay, I remember why I like this. I remember what a big thing this was to me, and I'm actually in one place, so I can, buy paints and have shelves full of models and all that again. So me and a buddy split the Indominus box, and I was like, man, they're giving me this box, and it's full of Space Marines, but every one of them's got a sword. These aren't Ultramarines; these are for sure Black Templars, and that's where it started with me. So I've only been into the Templars thing for, well, whenever that came out. So three years or so.
Yeah, so a few years, but it was an awesome kit. Alex
Oh
and I have
yeah.
talked about it.
Well, and
It
just
was
like having taken like a 3 edition break and like seeing like just the new dynamic sculpts and the Primaris Marines and the Blade Guard veterans. Oh, it was just all so cool.
yeah, and you look at the codex, especially our newest
Yeah.
supplement codex, is like they're custom built as Black Templars.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like to see right there.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing that drew me into it, now that it comes to mind, is I read Hell's Reach because I got back into 40k with the guard and got some of it painted, and I was like, I remember reading the books as a kid too. I wonder, like, and I just off to Google, what are the best 40k books that have come out? And all at the top of like half the list was Hell's Reach, and I read Hell's Reach, and that absolutely sealed the deal.
Yep. Have you seen the YouTube adapt
No, I
adaptation of
haven't. You
that?
know what? People keep telling me about it, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch a movie at my desk for a while. So I haven't got to that one yet, but I'm very excited to check it out. I've heard lots of good things.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. All right. Well, I'm glad to see that you're with the Black Templars. I'll forgive you playing the
It
Xenos.
was a childhood indiscretion. It's far behind me, and I mean, I jumped in with both feet, and I think that's true of a lot of people, especially coming back and then immediately, like a year later, getting hit with, all right, you're painting models and you're not allowed to leave your house. So I think I've painted like 5,000 points in the last couple of years or something
Oof.
crazy like that.
Yeah,
So
I
many
think a
little
lot of people.
plastic action Barbies.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic, that was a one positive of a bad situation, is a lot of people were able to catch up on their armies or start new armies,
Yeah,
and really kind of learn what the things that, the different armies out there, whether
yeah.
they're Black Templar players or not. It was a good thing for the community, I think.
Oh, I agree. I think it was one of those things. Well, I mean, like we all saw what sort of figures GW was pulling in those quarters. Like
Yeah,
the stay inside and paint dolls hobby was ripe for a resurgency for sure. And I mean, like honestly, like they have done a lot of right by the community. Like the way they have turned around on how they want to represent themselves to the competitive community and the lore
yeah,
community. Like I think they are, any missteps, current events aside, at any given time, there's always something. But I think by and large, they really are on the right path.
yeah. I agree. It's night and day from the olden days of third, fourth, and fifth edition, where a lot of older competitive players kind of point back to, and especially fifth edition was kind of like the known competitive time. But even then, like, they would release a broken codex and it was there for the
Yeah,
rest of the edition. It wouldn't do anything to address it. It was just like, okay, we'll just release the next codex that
yeah.
trumps that one, so everyone's playing that codex.
Oh, I remember the first time someone explained Fish of Fury to me. He's like, "Well, no, you can't charge him, but he's the close, and you can't go around. But I'm a skimmer, so I can see you." Oh,
Yep, yep. All right, so let's talk a little bit about competitive gaming for a moment.
yeah.
So what's your meta look like?
The meta where I live.
Yep.
We have some really, really good players in Calgary. We've got, I would say, like we have a seasonal league, and we get about 40 or 50 people for that, and that one's good because
Mm-hmm.
it's that one's a really interesting like tournament style because you're faction locked, but you're not list locked. So
Yep.
you get your matchup, and you know each other's faction, but you don't know each other's list. So it's still symmetrical data, but there's room to play there.
Yep.
And like Calgary's got a few. We do 3 or 4 GTs in town a year, so there's a healthy amount of competitive scene here, and we have players that do have that kind of inclination towards playing competitive games, even when we're out at the hobby shop on a Tuesday night for us, but on our hobby day. What is prevalent around here? Lots of elves, lots of elves of all description, lots of harlequins, lots of we didn't get hit quite so bad by the bugs this summer. There were a
Mm-hmm.
few Tyranid players, but we by and large missed that one because a lot of the stronger players in our area like those really fast dodgy lists
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the wrecking ball. So lots of Eldar, lots of movement. I know that there's a reasonable chunk in Calgary that are war machine, excuse me, refugees, so to speak.
Um,
So lots of movement focused armies.
Yeah, awesome. So, do you typically stick with? I know you mentioned a couple other armies out there that you picked up. Do you primarily play Black Templars then around
Yeah,
your area?
yeah, they're the only ones I have really. I guess I've got about 2,000 points of Alpha Legion or Salamanders, depending on how I'm feeling that day of the week, painted up. My current passion project is Chaos Knights, but that's more of a painting project than a competitive project. When I'm
Hmm.
going to an event, I do take the Black Templars. They are my baby. They are the one I have the most breadth of model range and breadth of experience with. So they really are my comfort army, even though they have gone through quite a few evolutions in a short period of time.
Yeah, it's funny. Alex will give me crap because I have a Drukari army, about 3,000 points, but I haven't played it yet. So I've had it for like 2 years. It's been built. I hate building things. I'm
Oh, I'm the
fine
exact
painting.
opposite. I love building things. I'm pretty mechanical by nature. I like doing stuff with my hands, so building model
Mhm.
kits is just so much fun for me.
I wouldn't mind it if there wasn't like all of the cleaning of mold lines. That's what
Mm,
kills me, the mold
yeah.
lines. But I have it built and I just haven't played it. And then I got Sister's Army. I got all
Oh
these
yeah.
armies that I keep on defaulting back to my Black Templars. I'm like, I don't want to
Yeah.
play my Black Templars.
There's been a big specialty games resurgent in our group lately. I think it's fair to say a lot of us were getting a little bit burnt out on the grind, burnt out on the competitive cycle of 40K. So I mean, I've got the House Escher gang on my desk right now, and then I've got some Titanicus stuff in the works.
Mm-hmm. And it's
Yeah. So
something
I've got
that's
other
definitely
projects, but yeah, Templars are the mainstay for sure.
well, perfect. All right. So we got to dive into this list. Before we talk about
Yeah.
the tournament itself, it's super interesting and definitely not what you would normally see as a competitive list that you would like typically think of. So walk me through your list and give me a little bit of insight on why you made the choices you did.
Yeah, I was chatting with some of the guys in the Discord the other day, and I wrote down a few things, and let me just go through my messages. Yeah, so coming into when I just started doing this is a little bit more backstory, but
Yeah, absolutely.
coming into my first couple GTs I did, they were on the old book, and by old book I mean the old 3-page PDF, and that really boiled down to you get advance and charge, and you get devout push,
Yep.
and that's your thing. And I just figured out what that was, and they took it away, and we got the new book, which is by far an improvement. Oh, the new models are all so cool. Like, man, like new
Yes, they are.
Helbrecht. Oh, even the Primaris Crusaders, they just look so good. But so we got this new book, we got our vows, and vows were really the standout thing because this is a while ago.
Mhm.
Um, AP creep is starting to get there. You got lots of people who's got that AP 3-4 shooting. And the first thrust of the book I felt was lean heavy on uphold the honor
Yep.
because it meant that we could do things like run triple redemptor dreadnoughts and expect them to stick for a turn longer than average. That's the whole joke. You got 3 redemptors and they will punch you because one of them will get there because sometimes 5-ups happen.
Yeah.
And that got some mileage. I was still getting my feet under me with going to tournaments at that point. Some stuff went through, more books came out, faster books came out,
Mhm.
books that really wanted to go around you instead of through you, and it became you were trying to catch people. And then Armor of Contempt came out, and that was really funny enough. I thought that was just an absolute death knell for Uphold the Honor, but it's taken it to where it should be, where it's situational but not always. It's still my most taken vow, but I think that's just more a quirk of the matchups I've had at recent tournament games as opposed to something particularly telling about the vows in general. So I was going into this and I was thinking, okay, Redemptors just feel really bad now. Like I've had mixed success with them. I'll still run them sometimes, but by and large, it even with the 5-up invuln, there was too many books that either very trivially just flip them over, just take them right off the table, or books that just don't care about them. Like Harlequins are a really good example. Harlequins, if you've got a plasma redemptor, that thing will pick up Marines like it's its day job. It will do that all day. But there is no amount of time you can give a redemptor where it will do appreciable damage to a Harlequin. It's just not enough shots. The AP doesn't matter. You don't have a sweep profile on the fist. You're just gonna you're not gonna be effective. And there's just more and more cases cropped up, and I landed pretty quick on no vehicles. That was no vehicles was the big first, like the first big thought I had that led to this list was Marines just don't have vehicles right now that feel impactful. So going from there, this specific list is very much a child of the Nephilim secondaries and the fact that we don't have good ones. And that's, I mean, it's unfortunate. Well, okay, so I really don't want to say it's unfortunate that we have bad secondaries, because I really, really like the broad concept of using secondaries as a lever on the competitive game.
Yep.
Because it doesn't touch Beer and Pretzel's hammer. They can rewrite the secondaries for every Warzone book that comes out, or every tournament season book, and they can tweak to that, and they can tweak the points, and they can do all this stuff with secondaries. And me and my buddy playing in the garage don't have to worry about a word of it. And I think that's a fantastic place for the competitive tweaking to be, because competitive lists bear so little resemblance to fluffy lists these days. It is how much efficiency can I milk out of the most points efficient thing I have. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how competitive games work, and that's what make the numbers really interesting. But if that is the sole balance priority, it really alienates, I think, a large portion of the players. So,
Yep.
yes, they're not perfectly balanced. This is the right lever to be pulling on, in my opinion. So we don't have good secondaries. We have 6 to pick from, and none of them excite me. The Templar ones. Let me pull them up here. The Templar ones. I think I pretty quickly dismissed our Templar ones. I spent a few weeks. I so badly wanted the new form of Bathe Your Blade to work. I wanted it so bad, and it's still, even with getting to pick my champion and your target, I still think it's too much agency to give the other player, because there's people that will absolutely hide him from you with no way to touch him. I mean, it's really fun to load out a bike chaplain and have him swing for the fence with Oath of Glory and stuff, but it didn't seem consistent enough for me. And the other, I've just about got them pulled up here: Black Templars and Space Marines. Yeah, so we have Oath of Moments was my mainstay through a lot of the last year, and I really feel like it's by and large dead in the new book. Part of why it was so good was that in games where you went second, even if you were getting absolutely crushed, it was a 9 to 10 points secondary, because you'd launch a guy onto an objective, you'd get or into the center, you'd get your 2 points, you'd be you can score Oath of Moments while you're tabled, because you're not failing morale if you're dead. It was a safe, consistent 9 when you're behind, and 13 plus when you're ahead, right? And obviously that's not healthy, to have the floor be so high, but the new version of it, taking the ceiling down on it felt really bad. And then with the large unit sizes I really like to run, I fail. I'm a coward. I fall back all the time. I fail morale all the time. I'm looking at Oath of Moment is gone. Carry Out Your Vows is just too janky to score well.
Yeah.
Um, and then you go to the one Space Marine one that I do take with consistency, which is Shock Tactics compared to Allow Not the Warship. And they're both very similar, but Allow Not
Hmm.
the Warship, yes, you can score more in one turn, but you got to jump through a few more hoops to do it. And it doesn't really play to something I'm going to get to in just a second here with the philosophy of the list, where you're only ever fighting over one objective at a time. So by process of elimination, I'm looking at our Space Marine secondaries and our Templar secondaries, and I don't have any home runs available.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. There are things to score out there. Um, can work with this, but when you don't have those absolutely A+ secondaries that you can bank on, the best place to find points in the game I've found for Templars is by creating a differential in the primary. The most points I can get is dropping your score.
Yep, that's a good point. A lot of play that we many of the points that we got in before Nephilim was off of Otha moments. Some of
Yeah.
those other ones, the easier to score secondaries that they eliminated, and now it's. I want to say it's a good thing that they're harder to score in
Yeah.
general, but we have some of those books that have come out that are very easy secondaries
Yeah.
built in. Like you got the sisters, you got
Yeah.
uh, Drukari still
Necrons.
have some easy ones. Necrons,
Yeah.
were
Necrons with
very
their
easy.
and the Necrons and Sisters are really the two standouts in they got very marginal mechanical alterations, but their secondaries are completely fresh.
Hmm.
And they just shot back up. Those were the two armies that I had in mind when I mentioned that I don't necessarily feel that they got it right or perfectly dialed in this time
Yeah.
around. But I think that playing with those secondaries in a big way is a healthy way to keep on the pulse of the competitive game. Yeah, so I'm looking at my book. I'm looking at my secondaries, and I'm saying, okay, in my ideal game, I I can be realistic and say that Templars in general, or at least Templars with the amount of brain cells I can devote to them, are not going to be winning games 100 to 50. Like, that's not in the cards. My wins are going to be coming like 85-70. Like, I need to, or I guess a better first example would be like there's some absolutely rocket tag matchups where you're like looking at end game scores of like 98 to 91. Templars are never going to do that. They need to suppress scoring as much or more than they created. And luckily, at least in my opinion, I think we have some really strong tools to do that. And finally, I'm segueing onto the question you actually asked me, which was, what am I doing with this list? And I think the one thing, or at least the thing I've gotten the most questions about, is the Assault Marines
Yep.
versus the Vanguard veterans. So Assault Marines do one thing and one thing only, and that is okay. Two things. They do two things and two things only. I promise this isn't a Monty Python sketch. They move 12 inches and have power armor. Though that's what they do. Those are the only two things I expect out of those Assault Marines. They will occasionally do more than that. That is not the plan. That is not what they are there to do. Uh, when you look at Assault Marines, bare bones. I'll touch on the fact I think the hammers on the sergeants was a misstep. Those have been taken out in recent iterations. But so a bare bones assault marine squad that wears power armor and moves 12 inches is 180 points. That's 20 wounds that moves 12 inches. Vanguard veterans with the same loadout, even before you talk about tricking them out, sit at what is it, 220 or two? Yeah, 220.
Yep.
So you're at a 40-point deficit. And by the time you multiply that by 3 for rule of 3, that's the third unit you've found in the discount, right? Like If you got Vanguard vets with 1 lightning claw each, no other upgrades, is 250 for a squad. 2 of those is 40 points more, or 40 points less than 3 squads of assault marines. It's an en masse Imperial Orcs approach to things, but between Armor of Contempt and some of our stratagem tech and the way we can stack buffs onto those squads, I'm sending them forward to tire you out, suck firepower, and hopefully have like a model left alive next turn. That's that is the ideal operating case for those assault marine squads. Is they want to go out, do their thing, score me shock tactics, deny you getting that third pip of primary, make sure my opponent is, if I'm having my way at the start of their command phase, they're never on more objectives than me. And ideally, if I'm way off in a corner, or they don't have the resources in place to commit, like one of those little nerds will survive. And you know what goes on one assault marine just as well as it goes on 10 is strength of conviction.
Yes, it does. So you're kind of touching a little bit on something that I've tried to pass on to a lot of the people in our Discord and videos when we talk about differing things is we have to focus on the mission,
Yeah.
primaries, and secondaries. Yes, it's very easy to focus on, you're like, can my list kill things? But ultimately it doesn't matter if you can't score points.
And
And
unfortunately, the answer is no a lot of the time these days. But yeah, even if you can, tabling is not a victory.
yeah, it's not. And I mean, you do have to have some answers for
Mm-hmm.
differing opponents. Uh,
Absolutely. You can't let them just run over you.
but it's great that you're talking about the fact that, hey, these aren't gonna kill things, but they're gonna score me points. You're building your list with secondaries in mind,
Yeah.
which is, I think, is really critical for any player in
Mm-hmm.
Warhammer, but especially for the Black Templars. I mean, we have some really cool tech, but we have to be very careful with our resources because we're still
Yes.
paying the Marine tax,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have the really specialty high powered stuff like the
Yeah.
Blood Angels or
Yeah, that is the comparison that comes to mind, and especially with the assault marines I've been doing, is what is the distinction between blood angels and this kind of list?
Mhm.
And blood angels are way killier. I think that there's a valid and valuable distinction to be drawn between lists that ostensibly look very similar that are accomplishing their goals by killing things versus using those similar pieces as movement pieces and blocking pieces and scoring pieces. You touched on it, is that there's really, as there always has been for Warhammer, there are have books and have not books when it comes to certain aspects of the game. And Black Templars are not a particularly lethal book. There are some things we can do that are remarkable. There are some combos that are fantastic, but by and large, you do not have you don't have exploding sixes as your, well, you can, but putting that aside, you don't have +1 to wound as your chapter tactic. You don't have extra attacks on the charge. You don't have this or that or the other thing. You're not like a Drukhari where you don't have to pay Space Marine tax to kill as heavy as you do. You're not like a Tyrannid that's going to run monsters over an entire list. You're not a Knights list that just has absolutely withering firepower. You
Yep.
you need to exist in, I'm paying a power armor tax. How can I make that work for me?
All right. So when you're building your list, you made it pretty clear that you're building for your secondaries and denying primary points for your
Yeah,
opponent. So when you get down to the nitty gritty, uh, what are you leveraging in your list to actually kill something? If you need to kill something, what are you using and how are you leveraging that in your match?
sure. So there are so there are 3 units I think of as my killie units, and broadly speaking, 2 of the 3 will be in play in a given game. And those ones, I think they're pretty obvious from the list. It is the Primaris Crusader squad, the Centurion squad, and the Eradicators. The Primaris Crusader squad is roughly always on. There will be a good target for 60 chainsword attacks plus power fists. There will be something you can touch with that. Sometimes it's tricky to get there, and on lighter tables, you will just get nickeled and dimed before you can get there. Excuse me, but that unit is large enough and has enough insulation for those 4 power fists and that Champion of the Feast Sergeant with the Sword of Judgment, which is 2 CP well spent as far as I'm concerned. There's so many things with exactly 3 wounds that need killing these days. I ran up at Fields of Damnation. I ran up against a guy playing a really interesting word bearers list with a bunch of bikers.
Oh.
And flat 3 is really good into bikers. Terminators, even just like Death Guard infantry, stuff like that. Having that flat 3 in the squad and having it like it's 5 attacks on 2s, it's gonna be appreciable. So that sergeant is 2 CP well spent as far as I'm concerned. And then you have matchups where you look at the 2 shooting units in the list, and there's only 2 units that shoot, and it's the Eradicators, and they are in the list only because there's a chapter master. As far as I'm concerned, you cannot run one without the other. They are so night and day between running them with full rerolls to hit and without.
Yep. I think
the heavy melter rifle, getting those really high damage single shots is huge. Being able to, if something's like really close on you, and just being able to sink like 7 or 8 damage into it with one shot getting through an invuln, so valuable. But you need the chapter master to make those pop. So they're in there for those the power armor games, the vehicle heavy games, and then polar opposite to that, you have the Centurions. And Centurions are, I think, in my opinion, a pretty deceptive unit because you look at the model and he's got a huge drill on each arm, but he's a shooting unit. It's the Hurricane Bolter plus 2 flamers on them, and they're eligible for for the Emperor's Will, the one that used to be Advance in Charge.
Yep, they are. So you can get
Yep,
them into the center of the table pretty quick.
it is one of the 3 stratagems I think that Centurions can use. It's that and Auspec Scan. But so yeah, the Centurions they innately ignore cover. They just have an absolute mess of shots. It's a unit of 4 of them inside 12 inches, which you're re-rolling your advances, you're advancing and shooting rapid fire. You're getting 48 shots with the Hurricane Bolters. You're getting 8d6 with the Flamers. Into T3 armies, they will pick up whatever you need them to, and they will do so in a way that that your opponent needs to commit some very valuable resources like multi-meltas or psychic powers. I'm thinking specifically Sisters and Craftworld Eldar. That is a unit where the second it pokes its nose out of cover, it's getting revealed, it's getting jinxed, it's getting doomed. But that is a resource sink, right? Like that's something that you can leverage. So those are the set pieces that kill things, and they'll do so in the case of the Primaris Crusaders and Centurions. They'll do so by threatening out of cover, preferably no window cover if you can get it, but that's more important to the Centurions than it is to the Crusaders, just because the Crusaders have more ablative wounds. But they want to be in kind of one of those mid-board ruins, waiting for someone to step into strike range, which for the Crusaders, devout push is so valuable. They're like, oh yeah, I'm well, you move 6 and I'm 15 away.
Yep.
No one's gonna try a 9-inch charge. No, but I will try a 6 with a reroll. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, devout push cannot. Oh man, that stratagem's got so much power. It's crazy that this is a less janky version of it, and it still does so much. And I was going to touch on it talking about the eradicators. Um, when you talk about like what Black Templars have going for them that other Space Marines don't, we have Fire and Fade.
That's a tactic I've used many times in my games with the Eradicators.
With the modal targeting to devout push, the fact that you select and then either have to go towards an enemy or towards an objective, it lets you set up so many situations where you can put a line of 4 eradicators on one side of a solid wall, hop them out at an angle, and then as long as you're coming diagonal when you're back into that cover, you're closer to whichever of the modes you picked. It's something you really need to, and especially in my area, player place terrain has gotten more and more common. Uh, I think that's reasonable. I think having seen what a lighter burden it is on TOs, uh, it's I like player place terrain broadly speaking, and it's something you need to be really conscious. Is you can set up these alleyways where you've got ruins that are 5 inches apart or whatever, and you come out of one up against the wall and keep moving along that same diagonal with your devout push, ending closer to the enemy. But you get these fire and fade shots and can really leverage those eradicators, because that is the the fail state of the eradicators, is that they get caught out and they're just a dude in power armor. They're T5, but they're nothing special.
Yep.
They're very expensive Gravis bodies. They're 60-point models or 55-point models or whatever. Um, yeah, being able to fire and fade them is incredibly powerful. I use devout push so often in games between like units that start on the go line, and if I'm going second, I can steal that 3 inches to make a charge viable. Like I said before, with the Primaris Crusaders being able to project further out of those midboard ruins, or with fire and fading eradicators, I think it's a tremendously versatile stratagem.
Yeah, it's a linchpin of what we can do
Absolutely.
on the board. It's critical to, and we've talked about this in several videos. It's like there's many times where you're spending your turn CP on that stratagem.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
and
More than anything else.
a lot of times even on in Nephilim, you're using your opponent's side of the turn's CP
Yeah.
on devout push.
Yeah.
So, and that really kind of segue into my personal belief that you need to save some CP at the beginning of the game in your
Yes.
list buildings. So if you want to do some of that extra stuff, because you're using devout push, devout push,
Oh,
devout
so
push,
much.
devout push.
I feel this list that I ran at Fields of Damnation starts on 3, and I would be very, very cautious of going below that 3, because that 3 is your first turn devout push and your first turn interrupt if you're playing into a fast melee army. And you'll get more as the game goes on, but like
Yep.
that stuff you have to have.
I suggested no, absolutely no lower than 2, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
players are taking 0 because they're taking the upgrades, and I
There are
can't buy into
armies
it.
that can. I feel like we have too much play in our stratagems.
I agree. I agree. So it's nice to have some validations with someone who's performing well out there.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
oh yeah, yeah, 3, and it's a shame because we do have a lot of really cool relics and stuff. So my
Yeah.
third, I start on 3. 2 of them are, as I mentioned, on that Champion of the Feast, Sword of Justice, or Sword of Judgment rather, Crusader Sergeant, and the other one is Ancient Breviary.
Give you a little bit of consistency with those.
Yeah, oh, consistency is so key with the litanies, and that's to touch on playstyle, I think in just casual conversations with people, I really liken this list to a revolver, like a 6-shooter, because I have one bullet in the chamber, I give it all of the mustard, and I fire it off. And it's one bullet a turn, but you've got enough bullets for every turn.
Yep.
And that sauce is Grimaldus gives the squad that's going out to die, gives them a feel no pain, gives them 6s on mortals, or the reverse of that, give them mortals on 6s to wound. The other chaplain gives them +1 to wound, which is huge, because again, these high toughness Black Rune of Damnation is absolutely untenable to get through without a source of +1 to wound. Because they're putting it on possessed that are T5 or Terminators with a 2-up save. Like, you need so much volume going through to kill those units that you give them all those buffs. If the Eradicators aren't shooting, you give them Chapter Master. You give them Strength of Conviction on the Assault Marine squads so that they're OBSEC 2. Off you go. Load up a bullet for next turn. I tend to deep strike like into non-melee armies, like so armies that I'm not concerned about them all-inning me and getting shoved into a corner. I tend to deep strike 2 of the Assault Marine squads just to open up some room in the deployment zone, just so I have less of a parking lot to deal with turn 1.
Okay.
But I'm not like it's also really nice like mental play, because it's like, oh, I got to leave units back to screen the corners. No, those are just for later. Those guys are coming down in my deployment zone so that all of the chaplains and stuff can tell them to do a good job and have fun at school before they go off to die.
Oh, the Black Templar mentality.
Yeah.
Meat shields.
Oh yeah, it is the Imperial Wog for sure.
All right, so I'm going to hold that thought on deployment. I'll get to that in a
Yeah.
second, but I want to talk about the tournament a little bit. I know
Okay.
you took a loss at your last game, and that
Yeah.
kind of factor a little bit into your answer here. But did you face any opponents that kind of scared you or kind of pushed your list to the limit?
Yeah. So that list that I played so funny enough, I played with like the difference of like 1 relic and like 8 in this squad versus 6 in this squad, like down to like 3 or 4 models. I played the exact same Bloody Rose list in rounds 3 and round 5. And that list is very frightening. Repentia are just so efficient. And they want to do that middle brawling that I want to do, but they do it so much more lethally. So Sisters was a big concern for me. And I just that last round where I took that loss was to Riley Tremblay, who won the event, and he is a phenomenal player. He knows that army inside and out. He is like very very deeply frightening, but an absolute joy to play against because he's so deliberate with everything he does. He's just such a good player, and he knows his own game plan to such an extent that it feels absolutely daunting to try and knock him off those rails.
Yeah.
Going in though, what I was very worried about was, in a word, Abaddon in a category phase caps. They are, I think, the largest vulnerability Templars have.
Yeah, because we don't have a psychic phase, so that takes that down a little bit.
Yeah.
In your particular list, you don't have a ton of shooting, or at least that you can leverage and consistently.
Yeah, it's not the kind of shooting that is particularly daunting to those phase cap models,
Yeah,
because like Eradicators, you can't split fire, you got to sink a whole unit into them. Centurions, everything that's got phase capped is either toughness 1 billion or 2-up save or both. Um, it's we're not allowed to take a space wizard, or at least we can take an inquisitor, but they don't really do the witchfire thing very well. I was very frightened because I've seen what Abaddon can do in combat, and if Abaddon is across the table, he's character blocked, so the shooting avenue kind of goes out the window. Um, Gaz and Catan shards you can shoot, so there's at least that. But Abaddon in particular, you have to feed 3 combat units to him minimum. Like, and that's not talking about the agency he has on his own turns. It is, I need to make the choice to feed him 3 units. And that's such a huge part of my list that it's very daunting to deal with, and it turns into, I was prepared if I came across any Abaddons, and I came across one in round 4, and I was very, very fortunate that my opponent was more scared of me than I was of him, and played Abaddon very cautiously as a counter-punching unit, which he absolutely succeeded in, but like, I was absolutely shaking going into that game thinking that he was just going to ram Abaddon straight up the middle and just take me apart, because he'll pick up so many Space Marines so efficiently.
Yeah, and I agree. It's, sisters trade really well. We have Necrons that don't really kill us very well, but they beat us in the secondary game. But that's a winnable match. Um,
Yeah, that one I feel like, especially this kind of like high speed Templar archetype, can deal with, because you've got the 12-inch move that you can actually catch wraiths and scarabs and tomb blades and stuff like that. You can catch them and prevent them from doing that one toe onto an objective, start your action sort of thing. Yeah, but it was sisters because they do that trading game and brawling game really well. And yeah, definitely phase cap models, Abaddon, multiple Catan shard lists, that sort of thing.
so I'm going to pose the opposite question to you. What do you think you are best against?
Templars really thrive into armies that are light on OBSEC. And a lot of that hinges, in my list in particular, on strength of conviction. Being able to tag those assault marine squads, in my case, Vanguard veterans in a lot of people's case, being able to shoot those over somewhere and create that primary differential we were talking about. Uh, I think armies like orcs, where they do have the absolute combat juggernaut in Gaz. Gaz is monstrous to kill, as he very well should be, but orcs I find doable because, aside from the boys, they don't really have OBSEC, nor do they have ways to get OBSEC. So you end up in a lot of situations where they're scoring their secondaries really well, and it's very hard to stop their secondaries. Get the good stuff, biggest baddest war boss, even Green Tide. Like, there's not a ton of levers to interact with those, but between Armor of Contempt really pulling their teeth to a degree, and that on-demand OBSEC, you can find avenues to absolutely dominate the primary. I played Orcs round 1 at the tournament, and I was fortunate enough to be doing a 2-3 more scoring. Can't remember exactly which mission it was, but it was hold 2, hold 3, hold more.
Yep.
So there were turns where I could shoot out a squad of assault marines, not even need to give them a strength of conviction, just outnumber, and go, okay, you score 0 on primary. I'm only going to score 8 because you're going to kill everything I put out there. But 8-0 is still an 8 points differential. And if I can do that a couple games in a row, or a couple turns in a row, it creates enough of a gap to catch up on those
Yep.
premium secondaries.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
that is a line we have. Knights are very tricky because of that, because they have a lot of OBSEC, but it's also only 5 models, so strength of conviction can get you around it. And melta bombs are always great into knights. That is a very important stratagem to remember, is melta bombs, because assault marines have it and Vanguard veterans have it.
Yep. They'll put a average of 4 mortal wounds on them, I
Yep.
believe.
But you got to have your chapter master reroll, because you still need to hit with it.
Yeah, I
There's
am.
been so many times where you go, okay, melta bomb. Oh no, CP. Oh no, and just like the having to double down on the CP spend for the melta bomb just feels so bad.
Between the melta bombs and my crack grenades, I am the worst. Like, if I hit it, I always fail to wound.
I don't know if I've ever wounded anything with a crack grenade.
It's just like, I might as well not even try. You're like, why not? Like, because I already know the result of the roll. Let's
Yeah.
just move on. All right. So I told you we were going to go back to it. So
Yeah.
walk me through your a typical deployment. I know this is going to be opponent dependent on some of these things, but what does a typical deployment kind of look for you, and how do you play it, and what does a first turn look like, whether your first or second turn?
Okay. So, um, first thing to check: are they going to try to be in my deployment zone? Orcs with trucks, blood angels. Um, a really canny Necron player might try it just to disrupt things with throwaway scarabs. Really, anyone super fast. Harlequins are another one.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to be in my deployment zone immediately, everything's on the table. It is not worth the risk of not having a good place to put something. Or like maybe one unit, like into Harlequins are maybe a bad example because there's a lot of impact you can have with an assault marine squad with 2 flamers in it dropping down somewhere. But digression aside, like if they want to be in your deployment zone, you want to have most, if not all, of your stuff on the table. And the reverse to that is if you're into something like Tau or Tau kind of sisters, depending, excuse me, gun lines for the most part, you're gonna put more in reserve just because it's less to hide. This list I was running has I think 70 infantry models, all on 32 or better bases, so it's a lot of stuff to try and cram behind obscuring terrain. Uh, so I've evaluated how much of my army needs to be on the table. I don't pay CP to strat reserve things. It's just the innate deep strike on the assault marines. I'll leverage for that. So anywhere between 0 and 2 assault marine squads off the table. I very rarely combat squad because, well, we'll probably get to secondaries later, but I like grind them down. So you've figured out how much is going on the table, and then you're looking what are my most primo terrain pieces.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on player placed or just broadly
Yeah,
speaking?
I mean, whatever you want to talk about. Player placed. Typically, we've done videos on
Okay.
that. So
So assuming we've done the player placed or whatever, I'm
mhm.
looking at what is base camp, and base camp is a term I like to talk about when we've got some guys at our club that are trying to get into a more competitive mindset, and that's a term that comes up quite a bit for marine players especially, but anyone with assault armies. With your terrain, you want to identify what your base camp is, and that is your safest terrain piece that you can get to places from. And that is largely where the Crusader squad goes. So they are going to want to be in or behind that base camp piece so that they can set up and get into position. Centurions usually take the weak side. They're a daunting enough threat that like an Armiger or like a squad of bikers or Terminators isn't going to roll a flank on its own. So you want them to kind of shore up the side that's not going to get all the characters. They can go central. There are matchups where you really do want them, especially if you have no windows terrain. They're a they're a great just like mental threat to have in a midboard ruin if you can find a home for them. But they're less mobile and they're not going to try and do the miracle mile to the opponent's deployment zone. So they don't need to be in the base camp. So you're setting up. You've got your Crusaders in the base camp, some number of assault marines in the sky, and then hidden behind your secondary terrain pieces. If it is a matchup where you're not super scared of getting absolutely shot off the table, you can just have a squad of assault marines in the line or on the line in the open.
Mhm.
But that's like low shooting armies. You're once you've got your base camp set up with the Crusaders, like you look for avenues where a first turn charge with the assault marines could happen. Like if you're on a quarters deployment where you only start 18 apart, or if you shouldn't want to plan around a first turn charge, but with Devout Push and Abhor the Witch especially, it is a play you have in your pocket. I really like to do that into Craft World players because they'll they'll go like conservative aggressive with like ranger squads and go, okay, like, yeah, I'm 20 inches away and I've got a wire weave net, which is great when I'm moving 12, but not when I'm moving a devout push and 12 and 3 from Abhor the Witch, right? Like,
Yep.
you can set that up, but you shouldn't take risks to do it. And then you set up. Oh, and so that assault marine squad who is hypothetically on deck for turn one, but not, they don't have to go, but they could go turn one. They need to be less than 12 inches from the Crusaders, because your buff characters need to be within 6 of each of them. So you are setting up that fortress of buffs. Helbrecht, Grimaldus, and the Chaplain are all going to be touching bases with each other all game, because they share a job, and that job is putting everything on one squad. So they need to be in range of your conservative turn one, which is the Crusaders, or your aggressive turn one, which is the Assault Marines. So one of those two squads is getting a big stack of buffs, and you don't have to pick yet. And then Eradicator's typical Eradicator placement. You want them somewhere cagey so that they have good fire lines. Again, like we talked about, if you can set up some of those corridors where they can fire and fade devout push from one building to the next, that's great. Sometimes easier on some boards than others, and player place can make it like less than consistent that you'll get the fire lines, but easier to set up the corridors, if that makes any sense.
So, like, you kind of touched a little bit on your typical game plan with those two units of your big Crusader squad and
Yeah.
Assault. Now, is that what your typical play is on a first turn, or how do you go about that?
Yeah. So I don't want to use a term as like inflammatory as like a noob trap or something like that with the crazy charge on the assault marines, because it's not necessarily that. It's just you're opening up an avenue where your opponent has decided that they can be however aggressive, and then you can push further than that. But a player who's super familiar with Templars typically won't let you get away with that.
Yep.
Um, Turn one for me is largely about setting up. If you go first, shock assault is not happening, so just those 3 points are gone. You're never getting them. It's a tragedy, but a minor one. If they had forward deploy, you can sometimes if they had forward deploy, you can get your first turn shock assault and send out those assault marines so that you know what's getting shot off the board next turn. First turn is really about setting up that base camp properly. It's about pushing that Crusader squad right into the tip of that ruin so that they can either do something terribly ill-advised and charge the Crusader squad, kill 10 of the Marines, and then get power fisted to death, or being ready to devout push next turn. First turn is really set up. I like with this plan we're talking about of our game plan is to deny primary points. You're not scoring those turn one, and the other guy's not scoring those turn one. So if you see an angle where you can put an assault marine squad somewhere that it's denying them one of their little forward operating units and makes them fulcrum in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's right, or sometimes that feels right. But largely you're setting up for your main game plan, which is messing with the primary. So turn one, you're not scoring primary anyways. Just get set up, get your assault marines, get your two options to punch with into your two forward good terrain pieces. Make sure your characters reach both of them, and then start having that second and third and fourth stage assault marine punch ready to go so that they're in position to be in the chamber next turn.
Absolutely. That kind of plays into the next question I have. A couple more for you. Uh, but you touched a little bit on it throughout this interview on your secondary choices, and you even brought it up just a few moments ago. What do you typically kind of default to as far as your secondaries? You talked about shock tactics quite a bit, so I assume that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be one of them.
Shock tactics pretty much every game, unless you're getting absolutely housed. You can manage 9 into most armies. There's some things like Death Guard that won't let you. just because Death Guard is all obsec and tougher obsec than you. So like there's edge cases, but shock tactics is a staple. Grind. This unit or this list I ran at this event was only really like, not counting characters, it's like 9 units. It is large units, but it's large units and you manage to put them everywhere, but there's really, it's very feasible to into everything but the most lethal armies expect to lose like one whole unit a turn. Like everything will get chipped and everything, but
Mhm.
you're going to lose one, maybe two a turn. And if you're playing into something that's like really trade heavy, like Sisters, or like where you'll kill whatever Repentia just killed your squad, and then maybe a squad of Battle Sisters. That's still 2-1. Into like that really MSU playstyle grind is really good, but even into like I've successfully taken it into Knights just because like if you kill 2 Armigers, they're probably not, well, it depends. It's not, I said that and then immediately it felt bad in my heart, so don't take grind into Knights, but just take bring them down. But um grind I got a lot of success with. I didn't go in planning to take it every game, but I did take it 5 for 5. I played into people who did have that kind of what's very popular now with the small trade units, right?
Yep.
And this unit, or this list rather, in favor of trade units runs really beefy trade units. So like I had good success with grind. Banners I took every game, and that was a big revelation for me coming out of the last mission or the last tournament pack, is that I really, when we had some slightly better choices like Oath of Moments, I
Mhm.
really disliked taking banners on 5 objective maps. But with the addition of the Assault Marines and just the broadly lower scoring secondaries for Space Marines, I've really come to appreciate banners. Like, yeah, you're scoring 2 a turn, but man, you're scoring 2 every turn.
Yep.
Like that's something. That's something a lot of the time.
I feel
Uh,
like banners is almost an auto take for Marines now
absolutely.
because it's one of the most reliable and
You're never
consistent
going below
scoring.
5 on banners unless that is the least of your concerns.
You're getting wiped off the board at that point
Yeah,
otherwise.
I mean, if the other guy's using you as a mop, then not much you can do about that.
Absolutely. So I got one final one for you, and then I'll
Yeah.
let you go. So hindsight is kind of 2020 here, but any changes that you think that you would make with the list going forward? You mentioned you were kind of typically making a little bit tweak here and there, and any advice you'd have for anyone that wants to play your list?
Okay, so couple things. Immediate tweaks. If you wanted, if you were interested and wanted to run this list, the one change I would make is you drop the Thunderhammers off the the Assault Marine Sergeants. You just give them a pair of Lightning Claws because it's free and it's
Yep.
5 attacks. Awesome, free. Um, the the 30 points you save there, you bump the Firstborn Crusaders to a second squad of Infiltrators. Having 2 squads of Infiltrators is a full third of the map they cannot deep strike in. If you've got them laid out right, they will completely lock that down. That is just a good, safe use for those 30 points. It's better than 3 attacks with a Thunderhammer on 4s.
Yep.
So if you're playing this exact list, drop the Thunderhammers. Worth trying. Whiffs too much of the time. Most of the stuff they're swinging into, you're hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s. So you're like maybe converting 1 attack. Maybe. Uh, just use it for better, safer backline play with the infiltrators. Don't forward deploy them. That gets them killed. They are for screening. And like mission 1-1 where you need your CP, there's one guy who's got his tippy toe out of your deployment zone, but don't get aggressive with them. They will die, and they will give like Death Guard who move 5. They will take any launch pad they can get. They will roll 10-inch charges all days if it means they've got Terminators in your lines. Yeah, so this list, that's the tweak I would make. Me going forward, I was really kicking myself for a long time because I came out of this event, one, deeply jealous of Morven Vol, full rerolls on a stick. Oh, so good. Um, and just like the aura reroll ones of everything. Vol's so good. I'm so jealous of her. Um, I I've come around on Vanguard veterans. They're expensive, but they are night and day for killing.
Yeah.
Uh, I have dropped the Centurions for a squad of Vanguard veterans. I know I just said they're good, but I dropped the Infiltrators down to another 90-point nerd unit of Firstborn, and taken the loose 30 points from the Centurions plus the 30 points there, and turned that 60 points into one of the other Assault Marine units becoming Vanguard veterans. So down to 2 squads of Assault Marines and 2 squads of Vanguard veterans, 1 Claw, no other upgrades. I found the Centurions were doing their best work in games where I didn't need them to.
Mhm.
Centurions are a very weird unit if you've never encountered it, because its shooting is a leaf blower, but then it smacks you at strength 10, AP4, 3 damage. And they're tanky as all get out, especially with Crux Obsidian on them. They're good, but they weren't good in the matchups I needed them. They felt a little win more because the stuff, like the games they contributed most were games where it was like punishing misplays and punishing people that had maybe never seen them super often and weren't evaluating the math on how much it took to kill them or something like that. Like
Mhm.
they will punish misplays, but I found in the games where I was really sweating through my shirt and trying to eke out these very tiny edges, they're very reasonable to play around because they're not fast and they don't get bonuses from anything. They're not core.
Yeah. Yeah. That
And I
really.
love them. Don't get me wrong. Space Marine inside a second wider Space Marine, love it. Love it. I got 6 of them painted up and 3 more on the bench. I love those guys. But I don't think they do what I want them to in this list. And I'm very comfortable just making that job of midboard bully fully the property of the 20-man Crusader squad.
Yeah, but I feel like that would be a good place in your list there. I mean, it's yeah, the Centurions can hold a flank by themselves, but now you have 4 units that are really fast that can
And 2 of
adjust to
them
the
are
game.
very killy.
Yeah.
Lightning claws work so well with the litanies we get. +1 to wound and 6s deal mortals. 10 Vanguard veterans will get you your full 6 mortal wounds. Like on rate,
Yeah.
I think on rate they get you far enough over 6 that you're comfortable just thinking they'll get 6. That's something to just like broader. That's not Templar specific, but man, people do math for on rate. On rate means you're flipping a coin to get that number of anything, right? Like if you're looking at I want this unit to do this, you should not be looking at the top of the bell curve. You should be looking at back from there, right? Like it's when the dice, like obviously if the dice go ice cold, there's nothing you can do, but when you're looking and evaluating what you should be getting out of units, plan for like 1 standard deviation back off that curve.
I think the Vanguard veterans, if you're even just taking the 1 Lightning Claw, I think math has them just over 8 mortal wounds that they could generate on a
Yeah,
full squad.
yeah, that
So
tracks to my
you
math.
can afford to lose a couple to
Yeah.
and still hit that number.
Oh man, I played just like a tournament lists but friendly game at the club this week, and I played into an orc guy, and he had a unit of 12 Burnas with the points upgrade that makes him deal mortals on 6s,
Hmm.
and he came in and he wiped 8 of them. Like I saved my like I did the shrugs like a champ, but with the all 3 of those offensive with the chapter master rerolls with the +1 to wound and 6s on mortals, 2 Vanguard veterans, wipe 12 Ludas, and it felt very rude. Didn't feel good. So yeah, like Vanguard veterans, they'll absolutely. I think the version of the list I theory crafted out, I had 6 loose points. That's my biggest gripe with the whole Black Templars book, is that a Primaris Crusader squad with all the mustard is 356 points, because it ruins all your math unless you're running Vanguard vets.
Yeah, because they get the
You're either at
discounted points.
96 or 91 or some dumb number. I think I had like 6 loose points or 9 loose points, so those 2 Vanguard veteran sergeants got 2 claws instead of 1. But yeah, like Vanguard veterans, 1 claw each, 250 points. A way better vehicle for those offensive buffs. I still think the Assault Marines have their place. I think the Assault Marines are significantly more disposable. I
Yep.
think that those side objectives where the fight isn't happening, if you can park 10 Assault Marines there and your opponent's playing something slower, that's yours forever.
Yep.
But yeah, so that throwing in some of those Vanguard veterans, which makes the list a little more aggressive, a little less reactive. I'm liking. I've tried it going like full Monty, 3 units of Vanguard veterans, drop the Eradicators and the Centurions. I don't like it. It leaves you too vulnerable to vehicles.
Yep.
I think you need those Eradicators.
Yeah, I like it. It's very interesting. Not something you typically see, but I'm happy you're finding success, and I'm hoping that we'll have some of our viewers that will kind of take it for a spin and kind of let us know how
Yeah,
they're doing with it.
it's very movement phase. It's like you can score 80% of the points you need to score all game if you don't play any other phase. That is really the philosophy of the list. Oh,
Well,
and one more while we're talking about list
yeah.
trimming, something that I keep going back and forth on and back and forth and back and forth is I don't know if Helbrecht is worth the points.
Oh, that's a hot take. That is a hot take. Yeah, I play a little
Like,
bit.
sorry.
No, I play a little bit more balanced lists than what you have typically taken. I have a couple of shooting lists, or I should say what you typically take, but based on your list and this
Yeah,
tournament. But and he's been really kind of the center of my board. Uh, he owns that. He can
yeah,
be my advanced piece. He can be my counterpunch piece, but he buffs a ton of the pieces on in the center of the board because
he does.
everything launches off of Hellbrick for me. Whether it be my counterpunch units, my advanced
Yeah,
units, am I using Vanguard veterans? So I really like him, but I could see if you
yeah.
wanted to do something like a captain. I think you kind of have to have a chapter master.
You do, and you're not comparing Helbrecht to not bringing a captain. You're comparing Helbrecht to your absolute bare bones firstborn captain with chapter master upgrade and a chain sword is 125.
Yep, and
So
then you're
I'm not going is chapter master good. Chapter master is absolutely a linchpin, uh,
yep.
but is Helbrecht worth 35 points?
Because there's something to be said to generating CP in your list, taking the warlord trait, master of the codex, I believe it is. But
I master the codex is like you're putting 1 on layaway to get 2 if your dice are average. And so it in a vacuum, I've looked at Master of the Codex, and like the way I play the list, the chapter master is really never in danger because he just sits in the back, hanging out with his chaplain buddies and giving
mhm.
guys the coach butt pat on the way by. Um, my concern is that starting on less than 3 means that you're short in that very crucial turn 2 when you absolutely have to have an interrupt in your pocket.
That's true. That's
So
true.
it's and I mean maybe I'm what is that cognitive test they give 3-year-olds where you say you can have 1 marshmallow now or 3 later? Maybe I'm just failing that cognitive test, but I really like starting on 3.
And we all have our play preferences. Like I
Yeah,
mentioned, there was a
absolutely.
ton of players that are swearing by starting on 0 CP. I
Yeah.
I can't do it myself. I can't
Oh
do it.
no, no,
But
me either.
but I mean, they swear by it, but you know, results speak to it, and a lot of the tournament wins I've been seeing the last couple months out of the Black Templars, they're at least on 2 CP. So
It armies that have melee bread and butter need to have an interrupt in their pocket. I don't think that's particularly negotiable in my humble opinion.
well, I want to thank you for coming on today and spending the hour plus with us and talking about
Yeah,
your
thank you for
list.
having me.
It's been great to chat about Black Templars. I love doing it. I love celebrating all of our community members across the world. We have another person that we're going to interview. It's going to be a little bit interesting. He's French, doesn't speak a lot of
Oh,
English. We're going to see how that goes. But yeah, it's great. I hope that you can build on your second place finish and hopefully get a first here in the
yeah,
near
fingers
future.
crossed. We got a. I don't know if it's in the cards for me to travel in the next little while. I'm fingers crossed. I'm starting a new job here pretty quick, but I know Calgary. I think we're having a local GT in December, and I want to have my stuff tuned for that one, and that's going to be a very hard fight, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I've been really pleased to have been turned on to the community you guys have in the Discord and the YouTube, and it is nice to have access to the brain trust.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for coming on. I know it's a little bit late now getting there, but I appreciate everything you did. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you want to support us, I'd love to see a like and subscription from you. If you would like to join our Patreon, we have links in the description to support us. We appreciate everyone that has supported us over the past year or so. We do also have dice that we have produced for our channel. You can also see that in our description with our discount code. I know that we have sold through our first batch of them, but we do have some more coming, so you can pre-order those, as well as the Discord that we have been talking about is also in the description there. So thanks for all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Until next time.